All right, let's dive in. We're talking about a nuclear-armed nation of over 240 million people, a state that just always seems to be teetering on the edge. Today, we're going to unpack the incredibly complex web of crises, both old and new, that are seriously threatening to pull Pakistan apart at the seams.
So to really get a grip on the pressures building up in Pakistan's different regions, we've got to start at the center, in Islamabad. And let me tell you, the story there is one of chronic, relentless instability. It's this chaos at the top that really explains why so many other problems have just been left to fester for so long.
Okay, look at this number, 29. Since its independence back in 1947, Pakistan has had 29 different prime ministers. I mean, just let that sink in. That is a staggering amount of turnover. But honestly, that number only tells half the story.
Not one. And this isn't just some political trivia, right? This is the defining feature of Pakistan's political reality. All this constant turmoil creates a power vacuum. And guess who steps in every time? The military. It's become the real power broker. And what that means is that those deep, long-term grievances, the ones rooted in ethnic and regional identity, they never get solved. They just get pushed down or ignored until they explode.
You know, the fear in Islamabad of another breakup? It isn't just a theory, it's real. And it's rooted in this incredibly traumatic event from the nation's past that proved, once and for all, that the state could actually break.
This was an absolute cataclysm. I mean, the whole idea of Pakistan was a single homeland for South Asia's Muslims. The secession of Bangladesh, its eastern half, didn't just shrink the country's borders, it completely shattered that founding myth. It proved that religion alone just wasn't enough to hold the nation together when faced with powerful ethnic and economic anger.
And this wasn't just an internal problem, you know? The rest of the world was watching. Observers like the CIA were already predicting a domino effect. This event created a precedent, a ghost that haunts the Pakistani government to this day. And at the same time, it gave hope to other separatist movements. It showed them that, hey, maybe secession isn't impossible after all.
So, let's turn to where those internal pressures are hottest right now, Balochistan. By land area, it's Pakistan's largest province, by far. It's packed with natural gas and minerals, and yet it's also the poorest and least populated. And that paradox is really at the heart of its long, bloody insurgency.
For decades, intelligence assessments have pointed to this toxic cocktail of factors fueling the conflict. It's a classic story, really. Elected leaders get dismissed by the central government, valuable resources get shipped out with almost no benefit to the locals, prime land gets handed over to settlers from other provinces, and the local leadership is just pushed to the side.
So, how has the state responded to all this unrest? Well, often, instead of talking, the response has been brutal. This policy of enforced disappearances, what some call kill and dump, has created this deep well of anger and resentment. It fuels a vicious cycle. State repression leads to militant attacks, which then leads to even harsher repression.
Now, massive projects like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, were pitched as the big solution. The promise was jobs, development, a golden age of prosperity. But for many Baloch people on the ground, the reality has been the exact opposite. They see their resources getting stripped away, their own coastlines blocked by security checkpoints, and their traditional jobs like fishing completely wiped out. So for them, it's not development. It's colonialism, plain and simple.
And this chart, this is really fascinating. It basically puts numbers to these feelings we've been talking about. When you ask people, what's your primary identity? Look at the results. A huge chunk of Baloch and Sindhi people choose their ethnicity first, not Pakistani. This really shows you those deep fault lines running through the country's national identity.
So where does all that frustration go? Well, it explodes into a violent insurgency. Groups like the Balochistan Liberation Army, the BLA, have ramped up their attacks. And they're not just hitting the Pakistani state anymore, they're targeting Chinese interests tied to CPEC. And, in a sign of just how radical things have become, the BLA even used its first female suicide bomber in 2022.
But here's what's so crucial to understand. It is not just an armed struggle. Running right alongside it is a powerful, non-violent civil rights movement. You have activists like Marang Baloch leading these incredible long marches to Islamabad, trying to force the country to pay attention to the issue of enforced disappearances. It's a human rights crisis and a military conflict all at once.
Okay, so we've talked about the internal stuff, but these fires are constantly being fanned from the outside. Pakistan is smack in the middle of a geopolitical crossroads, and its domestic problems, well, they rarely stay domestic for long. And there's no better example of this than its relationship with Afghanistan. You know, for decades, Pakistan tried to play strategic games there, and it has backfired, big time. Every single move, from backing certain groups in the 70s to supporting the Taliban in the 90s, has boomeranged, creating massive instability on its own side of the border. And now, with the Taliban back in power in Kabul, the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP, has a safe haven and a huge morale boost.
So you have to understand, this is not a simple two-sided fight. It's an absolute mess. It's a crowded battlefield. You've got historical Afghan land claims, the legacy of Soviet and U.S. interference, meddling from Iran, and of course the ever-present rivalry with India, which often turns these areas into proxy battlegrounds. It's a regional powder keg, just waiting to explode.
And to all of this, it brings us to today, where everything we've talked about, the shaky politics, the old wounds, the internal rebellions, the external pressures, is all coming together at once in what you can only call a perfect storm.
Just look at this number. In 2022, the Pakistani Taliban was carrying out an average of nearly 46 attacks a month. For comparison, back in 2020, it was just over 14. Think about that. That's not a small jump. It's a full-blown explosion of violence, and it shows just how badly the security situation has fallen apart.
And this security meltdown is happening at the absolute worst possible time. Pakistan is just getting hammered from every direction. You've got a revived TTP and an empowered Baloch insurgency. You've got an economy on the verge of collapse. You've got a political system that's completely paralyzed after the ouster of Imran Khan. And then, on top of all of that, a climate catastrophe, with floods causing over $30 billion in damages. It's a genuine, terrifying, perfect storm.
So, when you put all of this together, all these crises feeding into each other, you have to ask a really scary and fundamental question about the country's future.
And here's why this isn't just a regional issue. Here's why this matters to the entire world. Because, and this is the big one, Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and growing instability in a nuclear-armed state is a nightmare scenario for global security. The risk of those weapons being attacked, or worse, falling into the hands of militants, turns Pakistan's internal problems into everyone's problem.
And so, we're left with this one question. As all these forces, political, economic, security, climate, all slam into the country at once, can the state hold? It's a nation caught between the ghosts of its past, the fires of its present, and a profoundly uncertain future. And the answer to that question will have consequences for us all.